important national conversation happening right now about racial disparity and coronavirus infections in populations of color, especially in the African American population. And I want to bring vitamin D and vitamin D deficiency into the conversation because we are learning that vitamin D plays an absolutely crucial role in protecting the body from coronavirus. And so it's certainly not the only part of the conversation. It's not the only piece of the puzzle. I mean, listen, I'm just a nerdy white guy. I am not qualified to talk about socioeconomic situations. I'm not qualified to talk about social predisposition, access to healthcare, any of those things. But vitamin D and vitamin D deficiency is clearly part of how you can protect your body from viral infections. And so we got to talk about this. And so I'm going to make myself smaller and get me out of the way. And what we're seeing is headlines like this one. The coronavirus is infecting and killing Black Americans at an alarmingly high rate. And it's true. There is a disproportionate amount of coronavirus infections and death in populations of color. As a matter of fact, the U.S. Surgeon General was just speaking about this within the past couple of weeks. So what we want to do is bring vitamin D and understand vitamin D's role in the body and how it protects you, and that deficiency is an epidemic in itself. And so vitamin D deficiency is very prevalent, and it's especially prevalent in African Americans. And again, this is not a statement, a racist statement. It's really anthropology. I'm not an anthropologist, but it's biology, it's science. The way that vitamin D is made is the sun's rays hit your skin and they activate a form of cholesterol and turn it into active vitamin D. And that vitamin D can then float around in your blood and do all the amazing things that vitamin D does. Okay, so I think one explanation for why vitamin D deficiency tends to be more prevalent in populations of color is that it simply has to do with the pigment of the skin, right? The more pigment in your skin, the more that the sun's rays are going to be blocked. And so anthropology explanation for this is, think about people whose ancestors come from, for example, maybe Scandinavia, where their skin is so light and they don't get a lot of sun for some parts of the year. And so when they do get sun, it doesn't take a lot of the sun's rays to make that vitamin D. Now think about people whose ancestors come from an equatorial region, like maybe Democratic Republic of Congo, right? There's an abundant, very strong sun in the equatorial regions, and so people tend to have a darker pigmentation to protect from getting too much of those sun's rays. Okay, so this is kind of a possible explanation for this, and what we're seeing is the science. Look at this chart, right? I find this chart a little confusing, but let's dissect it a little bit. When we look at the green color at the top of these bars, that represents people in the population who have optimal or great levels of vitamin D in their blood, okay? And what we're going to notice is that no matter what segment of the population, no matter in the general population, no matter what your race or ethnicity, only about 13% of people have that kind of great level of vitamin D, right? So that just tells us that vitamin D deficiency is rampant, okay? But when we look at the red color, that represents people who have a vitamin D level that is low enough that they are at risk of more sickness and disease. We're going to see that the segment of the population that has the worst vitamin D levels is Black Americans. This is adults. And so this is just showing us that, unfortunately, the darker your skin, the more likely you are to have a vitamin D deficiency. And now, why is this so important when we're talking about coronavirus infections? Is because more than ever before in history, we are learning that vitamin D is so crucial for a strong immune system and protecting you from upper respiratory tract infections, which is exactly what COVID-19 is. This chart was just published a couple days ago. Today is, I'm recording this April 24th, 2020. This chart was published, I think, 3 days ago. And if you look at the green color, okay, that represents people, again, who have a higher level of vitamin D. And the red color represents people who have a lower level of vitamin D. And these are they looked at 212 confirmed COVID-19 cases, and they put them into 4 categories, right? Mild was, mild infection, no complications. There's what they called ordinary, and then severe, and then critical was like life-threatening. And what they saw is that the higher your vitamin D, the more likely you were to have a mild infection and to recover well. And the lower your vitamin D, the more likely you were to have a severe or life-threatening case of COVID-19, right? So this is just one bit of powerful information telling us that vitamin D and vitamin D deficiency is a crucial piece of the puzzle for understanding how to protect our bodies, right? People are looking for solutions and strategies to protect themselves and protect their loved ones from viral pandemics. And vitamin D the evidence is becoming clear. It's part of the solution. Here's an article about vitamin D and its role in preventing the severity of COVID-19. There's been a lot of media about vitamin D as this coronavirus pandemic has come through. This is the former chief of the CDC talking about how coronavirus risk can be prevented by vitamin D. There was a study in Ireland that was published recently about how vitamin D could help build a resistance to coronavirus. There's been a lot of media about this, and it's been great because I'm passionate about vitamin D. Here is a PubMed article about supplementation and vitamin D could protect you. It specifically mentions COVID-19 by name. Okay, here's a Atlanta Journal of Constitution article about vitamin D, why you should be taking it right now. And so I wanted to bring this to your attention because I believe that vitamin D and vitamin D deficiency need to be a part of this national conversation about racial disparity with the COVID-19 infections. I would encourage you to check out our Facebook page. We have been posting article after article, lots of resources to help learn more about how vitamin D protects your body and builds the immune system. Just so you know, vitamin D to the rescue is specifically selling vitamin D to solve the epidemic and to fight human trafficking. What we do is we use proceeds for every bottle that you buy to fight human trafficking. And so I would encourage you to go to our website, vitamin D